Sudhu Arumugam, welcome and thank you for joining us. Sudhu, you're CEO of Sync. Can you spend a few moments talking to us about Sync, please, and what it does?
Yeah, sure. No problem, Mark. Sync is a end-to-end platform for the financing, tokenization, and trading of carbon credits, with a particular focus on African credits at the moment.
Okay, so talk us. Boston Consulting Group. They mentioned something a few months ago. They announced that the carbon credit market was going to expand massively. They're talking about 20 times expansion over the next 4 or 5 years. Do you agree with them?
Yeah, we do. And actually, to be clear, that's probably on the conservative side compared to some of the other estimates we're hearing out there. The voluntary carbon market was a $300 million a year market 3 years ago. It was a $2 billion a year market last year. And whilst Boston Consulting might be talking about 20 to 40 billion, there are other banks out there whose estimates are around 150 to 200 billion per year. So there's huge growth forecasts across, irrespective of who's estimating.
Okay, and Sync is concentrating on the African market. You're the first platform for the African market in carbon credits, aren't you?
We are, yeah. And the reason where we have a particular niche around Africa, even though we are a global platform, is that my co-founder and the team are based out of East Africa, particularly, specifically Nairobi, Kenya. So we have niche around people on the ground, against execution, local knowledge. Then these are things that are very, very valuable.
Okay, can you talk to us about the African market, therefore, compared to other continents in terms of
Sure.
size, prospects, potential, etc.?
Yeah, no, Africa is actually the biggest and largest carbon sink in the world. And what carbon sink means is that the holder of carbon dioxide, which is what the world needs. And if you look at the Congo Basin, for example, just by itself, it holds more carbon than the whole of the Amazon. So you can kind of visualize the scale here. And in terms of a numbers perspective, the quotes that we've seen from the World Bank and other multilateral organizations like the African Development Bank is that Africa needs around $500 billion over the next 5 to 7 years for climate finance. And so you can see the scale there.
Okay, so you mentioned finance and the way you're using the carbon credits to finance the factories that are going to create they're going to create the carbon credits, in fact, aren't they, in this case, in the case of Africa. Can you explain that process a little bit and the effect it has on the local communities?
Yeah, I mean, the way to look at the process is it's like any other sort of project finance. If we were building a mining business in Australia or Kazakhstan or Africa, wherever it is, you would have to put an investment down today around plant equipment and so forth. Or if it's a mangroves, you're talking about replanting mangroves or replanting forest trees. And really, you don't reap the benefits for another sort of few years onwards, right? From when the plant comes online or the trees are mature at a certain stage. And so really it's that gap between initial investment and production is what we're trying to solve for. And that's the gap, what we call the pre-financing gap. And that's the $500 billion opportunity for the world.
So, in fact, the work you're doing provides financing for factories and wealth and job creation in Africa, basically.
It does, and what's interesting to me is that if you look at carbon markets over the last 20 years, when the World Bank kind of was one of the pioneers in doing the first trades, the carbon credits were priced around carbon in and carbon out. So how much did it cost you to pollute? How much did it cost you to put away hedge the pollution or offset the pollution? Now, if you look at carbon, what constitutes the pricing of a carbon credit, I would say more than 50%, and maybe even way higher, is around the social impact. And what we mean by social impact is, for every dollar that comes back through carbon financing, how much of that reaches the hands of the local community or the indigenous people by way of more employment, higher wages, schooling, clean water, general improvement in livelihood. And that is now becoming more and more significant, with almost the carbon the carbon offset almost being a byproduct. So that the kind of core benefit that used to be social is now the main driver, and the co-benefit is essentially carbon.
Okay, so this is the perfect example of ESG investing, isn't it? Are you finding Your investors are all ESG concentric.
Yes, I mean right now the carbon market is very much dominated by middlemen, intermediaries, and these are typically commodities houses, mostly around based in Europe, Switzerland, with a huge focus in Switzerland, Europe. I'm sorry, London and other cities in Europe. They sort of intermediate between the carbon producer and the end customer. So that's one of the reasons we launched Sync was to allow connectivity. And for us, what we mean by connectivity is that the end user connects with each other. So you got the producer in Africa in this example, and the corporate in Europe who wants to do social good and offset their footprint meet each other, and that typically ends up with two things that are key. One is higher prices for the seller, lower prices, I think, for the buyer, but both benefit. And of course, because of the higher pricing, the second derivative of that is that more money goes down to the communities in Africa. So that's the positioning of Sync.
Are you finding family offices or sovereign wealth funds or hedge funds getting involved in this space yet?
So I haven't seen any hedge funds getting into the space yet, and I think that could be because it's not a regulated activity. So I'm not sure whether they're allowed to, but we are absolutely seeing sovereigns and family offices. So if you look at the Middle East, for example, Abu Dhabi and Saudi have committed billions of dollars over the next few years to buying African carbon credits specifically. And you have a lot of European family offices, particularly around the foundation, who are now seeing the opportunity to not only to enact social good on the ground, but also tackle climate action as well.
All right. How is the pipeline looking for future deals in the next 6 months to a year?
The pipeline is looking extremely promising for Africa, just because the sheer breadth of assets that could be monetized here is humongous. Now, that doesn't mean that they will get monetized, and there's a couple of key reasons for that. One is that we need financing, right? Africa needs financing. I think in the last COP, in COP 27, the in Egypt, I think it was the governments pledged 100 billion to Africa, and very little of that has been seen. And that's really, I think, the main reason for that is around execution. And again, here is why teams like Sync and others who will come in the future, or who already are building in Africa, like ourselves, are the execution agents to make sure that that money that comes through climate finance gets executed in the right manner on the ground.
Okay. So Sync, although you started recently, you have completed some trades. You must be expanding quite rapidly at the moment. It must be a very exciting moment for you.
It is no, it is a very exciting moment. I mean, we're growing very very fast, particularly on the ground in Africa, because we need climate tech specialists. So some types of climate technology, and here when in climate they mean technology, meaning types of removal. So it could be forestry, it could be blue carbon, it could be renewable agriculture, direct air capture, things like that. Some of those techs we are already naturally specialist at because of the team's knowledge, and some we don't know at all. And so we're partnering with experts in the field around blue carbon and around satellite technology, for example, for monitoring and verification, and so forth. So it's about building out the ecosystem so that everything's in place from as a platform to execute.
Sudhu, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.